All right, let's go. This one's going to be a good one. Here, we're going to be looking at how Jesus and Jesus's teachings really do help in us navigating everyday life, and then also kind of processing what's happening if it's happening inside of everyday life. And today we're tackling a question that's been debated for centuries. It's coming up inside of President Trump's new tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China, which he most recently, put a pause on for Mexico after conversations. But let's just have a conversation today about the bigger question. What does Jesus think about taxes, and specifically about taxing foreigners? Now, before you check out and say, I don't do, politics and religion, I want to ensure you that today's conversation isn't just about taxes. It's not just about government. It's not just about politics. Because what Jesus is going to teach us inside of the biblical text is that this is really about wisdom and leadership. It's really about the cost of life's transactions. And it's really about the fact that no matter how high prices go, no matter how the Dow or stock markets, rise or plummet, guess what? We still serve a God who provides. Now, we're going to be looking at a key scripture today, Matthew 17, verse 24 through 27, where we almost have an exact replica of history that is taking place today with regards to modern culture and what's happening inside of the world around us. Inside of this very short but powerful moment in Jesus's ministry, he both engages with taxation and then also performs a miracle to meet a financial need all at the same time. All right, so let's break it down. All right, now, before we jump inside of the story, I want us to address the elephant inside the room. Because let's be real. Nobody likes taxes. Nobody likes taxes, but they have always existed. Whether it was the Roman emperor, whether it was the Roman Empire in Jesus's time, whether it was during the medieval kings or even inside of modern governments, let's just be honest, taxes are simply a part of life. A lot of people dread tax season every single time it comes around. We dread paying taxes every time we hop on, Amazon, and, we think that that item is just $10.99 when come to find out it turns out to be $15.99 once you add taxes. We walk inside the car dealership and it's like, that vehicle costs $20,000, but in actuality, it's going to cost us $25,000 once you put taxes on it. Or once we buy a house, it's like, man, I got a great deal on this house. It's only $300,000. But then once you add taxes to it, let's just be honest, y'all. Taxes are a part of life. Can we just acknowledge that? And even Jesus faced a tax inside of this passage, book of Matthew, the 17th chapter. Verses 24, it says, after Jesus and his disciples arrived to Capernaum, the collectors of the temple tax came to Peter and asked, doesn't your teacher pay the temple tax? Now, I want to put this inside of perspective. This wasn't a government tax. This was a religious tax that was meant to support the temple. Now, I want y'all to think about this as far as cultural context. There was a tax to go to church. If y'all think that these prosperity preachers and individuals who talk about the tithe and giving the 10% and sowing a seed inside of the ministry, if y'all think that that's bad, culturally speaking, back inside the days of Jesus, for you to participate inside of the temple worship, you had to pay a tax on top of your tithe, on top of your, just regular giving. All right. This was a tax that was meant to support the temple, but I want us to notice how they asked Peter about this tax and not Jesus directly. Because here's the thing, I believe that they assumed that if Jesus was a true teacher, that he would follow the established custom surrounding the tax. Now, this moment at large reminds us that taxes in some form, like I said, will always be there, whether financial, whether relational, whether emotional, Every major transaction in life is going to cost us something. I'm not just talking physical. Raising a family is going to cost you time, patience, and your finances. Chasing a dream is going to require sacrifice and perseverance. Even following Jesus and being a Christian, it means laying down your own will. I want us to have the conversation today because I believe that this act is going to teach us that everything has a price. And even Jesus, knowing this, uses this moment to teach Peter as well as us something deeper. Jesus turns around and asks this question about taxing foreigners. Jesus responds to Peter's question with a question, this very thought-provoking question. Inside of verses 25 and 20 and 26, Jesus says, "What do you think, Peter?" He says, "Who do the kings of the earth collect their duty and taxes from? From their children or from others?" There's one translation that says, "From those that they've conquered or from their family." And Peter answers and says, from others. And Jesus then replies and says, then the children are exempt. Now, Jesus is making a cultural point here because inside of those days, kings didn't tax their own families. They taxed conquered nations and foreigners, kind of what we're trying to do inside of our government today. And what Jesus is simply saying in a roundabout way is that if this temple tax is for God's temple, and me, Jesus, I'm the Son of God, I shouldn't have to pay a tax because I'm the Son of God, because I'm a child of the King. But inside of this roundabout way, Jesus makes this point. He makes this, I guess you could say, enlightened, truth. Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. He makes this enlightened truth. But here's what's interesting. He doesn't push back or resist the tax, although he doesn't feel as though he should pay it. Look at that. He doesn't make a scene. Instead, he teaches Peter a bigger lesson. He teaches Peter that there are systems in place, and while we might not agree with them, wisdom is needed on how we respond to them. He teaches Peter inside of this very simple and small story that government policies, including taxation, should be led with discernment as well as justice. He also teaches Peter, ultimately, as we're ready to discover, that as believers, that our confidence isn't in the economy, but in God who provides. And this brings us to the miracle of the story. Even though Jesus technically didn't have to pay the temple tax, he still chose to do it. Why? Because he wasn't there in the temple to cause any kind of unnecessary offense. He wasn't trying to, cause a ruckus. He could have easily, just like he did before, turned over the tables and made a big scene or whatnot. But no, he handles this inside of a way that, in my opinion, makes it a very powerful distinction on how we should be handling some of these cultural things that are taking place inside of our world today. It's how he paid the tax that makes this moment so powerful. Verse 27 says, "But so that we may not cause offense, go to the lake and throw your line out, Peter. Take the first fish you catch, open its mouth, and you will find a 4 drachma coin." Now, they only needed 2, but it says that you'll find a 4 drachma coin. Take it and give it to them for my tax as well as for yours. Can we pause and just sit in that for a second? Jesus didn't pull a coin out of his robe. He didn't turn to Judas, who handled the money, and say, hey, Judas, go take care of that for me. He sent Peter, a fisherman, back to his familiar place. using his natural skill to find supernatural provision. God didn't send the money in a way that made no sense. No, he used what Peter already knew. Now, Peter still had to act, most definitely. He had to throw out his line and trust that God would provide. But that amount that he got just for his obedience was enough to cover Jesus and Peter's tax, letting us know that when we act on what God has already told us to do based on what we already know, that God's provision is abundant, not just enough. This is where we take great encouragement today with the culture and world that is happening around us. Let's be honest, times are tough. Inflation is real. The cost of living is rising. People are worried about how they're going to afford basic needs inside of the upcoming days and weeks and even years. But here's what this passage reminds us. Number one, that Jesus knows what we need even before we ask. I want y'all to think about the fact that that coin was inside of that fish's mouth even before Peter came and told Jesus that he needed to pay the temple tax. I also want us to think about the fact that that provision doesn't always come how we expect it, but it will come. Like I said, Jesus could have easily just, taken a coin out of his robe. He could have turned to Judas and said, hey, take out of the church treasury and pay what we need to pay. But now sometimes the answer is in the work we already know how to do. Peter knew how to fish. He knew how to go and catch a fish. And in doing what he already knew how to do, God added a miracle to it. And maybe inside of this time of whatever it is that you're experiencing, whatever it is that you're going through, that God just wants you to do what you know how to do and trust that a miracle is going to come. Jesus could have created money out of thin air, but he didn't. He used Peter's fishing skills to demonstrate that God provides through both our efforts and God's supernatural power. So as we're looking at how Jesus in the Bible plays itself out inside of the cultural context of the world, I want you to know that if you're facing any kind of financial stress today, remember that the same God who put a coin inside of the fish's mouth can handle your needs. I hope that today's conversation encouraged you mostly today. Taxes, financial strain, cultural, economic uncertainty. Guess what? It's all a part of life, but they don't define our future. Because we serve a God who knows what we need and has a way of providing that beyond what we can imagine. If this conversation blessed you, I want you to share it with somebody who needs to hear it. And I want you to know that regardless of culture, that we serve a God who is unchangeable. Until next time, remember, God is your provider, and he will always make a way.